And for the first time, Russia's defense ministry acknowledged extensive losses, saying that 498 Russian troops have been killed and nearly 1,600 injured so far. Officials say fierce Ukrainian resistance and resupply challenges have slowed down Russian troops. A senior U.S. defense official yesterday said Moscow has moved 82% of the force it had amassed along the border into Ukraine. The U.S. has counted more than 450 Russian missile launches since the conflict began. Joining us now from Moscow is NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons. Keir, we heard more from the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. What did he say?
That's right, Mika. Just to segue for a moment, we actually also heard this morning from the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, and he was forced, effectively, to deny that they are about to impose martial law here in Russia. So, and I think the fact that he was asked that and that he felt that he should answer and say that that's not going to happen, according to him anyway, I think that gives you a sense of the level of the febrile atmosphere, honestly, not just here in Moscow, but inside the Kremlin. And then you're right, I had an opportunity just in the past few hours to ask some questions of Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. I asked him particularly about these claims in the West that President Putin is erratic, that he is isolated, and then went on to ask him about those nuclear threats. Take a listen.
For decades, Russia and America have maintained stability despite fearsome nuclear capability. Can you reassure the world that Russia would not fire a nuclear weapon in anger, would not fire a first strike?
We've got a military doctrine which describes the parameters and conditions for application or deployment of nuclear weapons. We do not have we do not have any escalation in order to de-escalate, as Western powers try to present it. I'd like to point out the statement of your president, Biden, when replying to a question whether there was an alternative to these sanctions from hell. He said that the only alternative is World War III. And everyone understands that it can only be nuclear war. But I would like to point out that these are statements of the Western politicians. They are repeating nuclear war. And this is not in the heads of the Russians.
And we actually, Amika, went back over the translation, and what he actually said in the beginning of that answer to me was, we don't have insane people, we have a nuclear doctrine. Quite extraordinary, really, that a Russian minister would have to say, we don't have insane people. And one of his part of his answer, I think, also will get people's attention, because he appears to say that Russia does not have an escalate to de-escalate policy. Now, what that doctrine is said to be is the use of nuclear threats in order to gain the advantage on the battlefield. In other words, in a conventional war, you threaten nuclear power, and that gains you an advantage. He appears to be saying in that answer that Russia does not have that policy. So, I suppose you could say indications of an attempt to reassure people, even while accusing the West of being threatening.
Well, it's interesting here. Another way to read into that is we're not bluffing. We're not threatening the use of nuclear weapons to get a better outcome in Ukraine. So that obviously very concerning. You look at Lavrov, and I know you've interviewed him and seen him, and we've all seen him a good bit before. You've seen him, obviously, much more than most of us. He did not look any more comfortable in that setting, answering those questions, than the Russian soldiers being confronted by Ukrainian citizens. You really do get a sense, whether it's the oligarchs that are fleeing on their yachts or having to sell assets across the West, or the military generals, or having to send these young kids into war, you really do get a deep sense of unease, not only from Moscow's leaders, but also from the middle class who are rushing the ATM machines and waiting in line for several days. What's your read on the ground there?
You do get a sense of that, Joe, and we get a sense of it because, as you can imagine, the team here talk to people, and quietly, not in public necessarily, people will share their sense of unease, and then there are these indications. You mentioned the yachts. Reuters reporting that a shipping tracking site can see super yachts, oligarch super yachts in the Maldives, and the Maldives does not have an extradition treaty with the US. So these small indications that there is a worry. There's even that report that kind of got buried a little bit a few days ago that President Putin's yacht, quite extraordinary that President Putin allegedly has a yacht, but his super yacht got moved from Germany before this conflict started. So certainly Western officials tell me that they have been seeing signs of the Russian super rich trying to shift their assets. Another example, I think, you can read into the fact that the very wealthy, most wealthy in this country, some of them have begun to come out and say, call for peace, say that they are trying to take part in peace negotiations. There's a calibrated message there from them, possibly trying to, kind of improve their reputations in the West, but also maybe trying to send a message to President Putin. Again, though, we've talked about it so many times. You see President Putin sitting at that distance from everyone, from his ministers, from the oligarchs, and you wonder really how they would get a message through to him. Maybe some of them are thinking that just saying something in public is the only way they can really get a message to him. But again, there's this very small circle around President Putin. I actually asked in that interview, in those questions to President Lavrov, I actually asked him not just how he responds to those claims in the West that President Putin is isolated and erratic. I actually said to him, is he taking advice? And when was the last time you were able to give President Putin advice? And he didn't answer that part of the question.
NBC's Keir Simmons in Moscow, thank you very much for your reporting.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.